This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com. Hey everyone, do you have a favorite movie that you would love to hang on your wall but you can't think of what scene or what poster to get? Well, now you can get the entire movie on one high quality canvas. With MoviePalette.com, you can get every scene from your favorite movie, or more specifically, the dominant color of every scene from your favorite movie in chronological order on a great high quality canvas. It also comes with a silver engraving of the title down at the bottom. It has rubber stoppers on the back to keep it from bouncing. And they have a huge catalog of what to choose from. Whether you're a horror fan or a fan of sci-fi, Marvel, Japanese anime, Disney animation, drama, or Oscar classics, there's a movie palette for you. And right now, MoviePalette.com is having a sale for 50% off for their Halloween sale. But if you go right now and if you enter room 15, you'll get 15% off of the movie palette of your choice. That's ROOM15 for 15% off of your movie palette. Again, this is a great value for a great piece of home decor that looks great for any film and for any film buff and anywhere in your home. You will definitely like this product. Mine is of The Shining, and I could not be happier with it. So definitely go to MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. As I continue my kind of marathon of films based on real life serial killers, and this is another one that I have in this 3-killer DVD pack. This is another early one I saw, one of the first real life serial killer films I saw. I think I saw this back in high school, which oddly enough, this is based on, yes, one of the most famous serial killers there are, even with a low body count, but some of the most notorious, most gruesome crimes. And for someone who has inspired so many fictional characters, there's been very few films about the man himself, which I thought was kind of strange. There's at least 3, one of which is just kind of based on the story, but it's highly fictionalized. Names are changed. And then there's this film, and then another one from 2007, which I haven't seen, but it's on my list. And that is the 1950s Wisconsin serial killer grave robber Ed Gein. And this is the first film to actually be based on him and tell his story. 2000's Ed Gein. Now, I guess its original title was In the Light of the Moon. I haven't seen that anywhere. I've seen it on a few killer DVD packs. I've seen the DVD by itself. Every time I look it up, it's always Ed Gein. I'm guessing In the Light of the Moon was just its theatrical title, which this movie made no money. I guess its opening weekend, it only showed in one theater. It made $5,000. By the end of the week, it was like $11,000. So I'm guessing because of that, maybe they changed it to Ed Gein. Now, as I've said before, Ed Gein inspired many fictional characters. I mean, Leatherface, Chainsaw Massacre, Norman Bates, Psycho, Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs, Dr. Thredson, I think his name is, from American Horror Story. But not just, it's not that they're based on Gein, they're all based on different aspects of Gein. Like, Norman Bates is the troubled mama's boy, Leatherface is the skin-wearing killer, and Buffalo Bill, again, is the killer of women to wear a skin suit, which Buffalo Bill also has elements of Bundy, Heidnik, Kemper, Ridgway, and I've seen some places say Brudos, but who is it? Gein, Bundy, Ridgway, Heidnik, Kemper, and I think Brudos in some ways. But as far as the Gein story goes, there's a film from the 70s called Deranged, which I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's very accurate. Although it's fictionalized. Like the guy's name isn't Ed Gein. I don't think it takes place in Plainfield, Wisconsin. It's more fictionalized, but it tells his story. So technically, this would make this the first one about Ed Gein. Like, if you want to watch an Ed Gein movie, the guy plays Ed Gein, takes place in Plainfield. And I have to say, it is fairly accurate. This is one that, when I first saw it, um, back then I was thinking, well, they're not really showing anything. It's low budget, kind of crappy. Uh, because Ed Gein is known to have two confirmed victims, uh, a highly plausible third, and then there's 5 to 7 others that people think he quite possibly could have been involved with. But he's also known for stealing at least 9 bodies from cemeteries over the course of 10 years, uh, making like 30 nighttime visits to local cemeteries, at least 3 local cemeteries, stealing at least 9 bodies or parts to bodies, and making just a house of horrors of all these crafts. You know, tops of skulls for soup bowls, lampshades, and furniture upholstered with skin, uh, leggings made out of skin, a whole what they call breast vest, a whole torso piece with breasts on it, a belt made out of nipples, lips put on a window blind drawstring, uh, heads and or skulls put on bedposts. I mean, the guy had stuff everywhere. On top of, one of his victims' skull was in a box, her face was in a bag. His other victim had her heart in a bag uh, in front of his stove. And they actually found a body in such a way down in the cellar of his house, which this movie does show. Which it does show some of his artifacts, especially at the end when it kind of does the Chainsaw Massacre, kind of like of a camera, but it doesn't have that classic Chainsaw Massacre sound. Now, I've talked enough about Gein. Well, there's so much to his story, and oddly enough, it's structured similar to Dahmer, where we are in the present day, which is 1957, which actually, it presents itself in 1957 in that his 2 victims were just days apart from each other or weeks, when in reality, Mary Hogan, the tavern owner or employee, was killed in 1954, and the hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, was killed in 1957. Here, they make a scene back to back, like just a few days from each other. So it's built around those events with flashbacks to his childhood. And oddly enough, it doesn't really show that much of his childhood like Dahmer. It just shows key events, like mostly how abusive his father was, how religiously domineering his mother was, the falling out with his brother, the brush fire. Well, they kind of tampered the brush fire, but his brother dying, and eventually just being him and his mother. I feel like they should have spent more time on his childhood, because Ed Gein is one of those cases that is one of the biggest proponents for nature versus nurture. Would he have been this way if his mother wasn't the way she was and keeping him isolated in the farmhouse? Or was he destined to be like this regardless? So I think this is one that could benefit from like a multi-episode Netflix series that can really delve into that childhood aspect, because when it comes to nature versus nurture, I don't think you're going to get a better case than Ed Gein. But the movie does do a fairly good job at telling the events. If they're altered, it, it's for the sake of time or something, which you're gonna get in a film no matter what. It's not like they change anything super drastic, other than uh, the name of the hardware store owner, his second victim. I think she was named Colette Marshall in the film, when her real name was Bernice Warden. Before I get too far, I do have some stuff on Gein. Of course, I've seen him in numerous documentaries like this, or the 20 or so multi-killer sort of encyclopedia books like this. I just pulled this because he's on the cover, and probably the most definitive work on Gein would be Harold Schechter's book Deviant. Which, anything that Harold Schechter writes, he's like the true crime guru. Any killer he writes about is going to be the most comprehensive, definitive work on that killer. And he has numerous books with just one-word titles. Like I have his Albert Fish one, which is called it's not Feed. Deranged. So I do have some stuff on Gein. I've seen plenty of documentaries. There's even one on the Chainsaw Massacre remake special features called The Butcher of Plainfield, which is also what he's been known as, the Ghoul of Plainfield or the Butcher of Plainfield. Now the film itself, 10 minutes in already. It was directed by Chuck Perrello, written by Steven Johnston, and apparently, and this would have been interesting, Werner Herzog, famous German director from the 70s and 80s, he wanted to make a Gein film back in the mid-70s with this one guy he was teamed up with, and that guy had interviewed Gein extensively, lived in Plainfield for like a year, and supposedly they were going to dig up his mother to test some theory. I think see if he did, in fact, dig up his mother, which he didn't, but that was scrapped. There's also a play put by George Butgeri, creator of Necromantic. So there's a lot of works on Gein. Film-wise, it's pretty much just, as far as fiction, it's Deranged, this, and then there's one from 2007 called Ed Gein, Butcher Plainfield, with Kane Hodder playing him. I don't know how good that's. I can't see Kane Hodder playing Ed Gein. As awesome as Kane Hodder is, but so Chuck Perrello, director, written by Steven Johnson. Steve Railsback plays Ed Gein, which is interesting because he played Manson in the original 70s version of Helter Skelter. And he played Manson flawlessly in that. And he does do a good job playing Gein. Mostly when he actually has like that little red flannel hat, his winter coat, then he really looks like Gein. At the end, when it shows him in the mental hospital after some years, he's got some old makeup and some gray and some white. He kind of looks more like him then as well. He does kind of always have that kind of mouth posture that you see in a lot of Gein photos. He does do a good job just with that awkwardness, similar to numerous actors that have played Dahmer, just showing that disconnect, just showing this vacancy behind his eyes. Some of the better scenes actually are when he's trying to mingle and act normal with some of the locals. And then like when he walks off and they just talk about how much of an oddball he is. And how one person will say, he's really odd, should stay away from him. Everyone else saying he's harmless. And it does play on his sense of humor, like even making jokes at Mary Hogan's out at my house and she's still there, and then him laughing, everyone being weirded out. Steve Railsback does do a good job as Gein. Now, the scene where Henry dies, which I believe he was only, see, born 1906, Henry died in 44. So he was like 38, but he still looks like old Steve Railsback. Which the movie says he died at the age of 78, when in reality he died about a month shy of his 78th birthday. So, not that that's a huge inaccuracy. Vanya Kurgel, if I pronounce that correctly, did the cinematography. Elena Maganini, oh, that was the editor. Robert McNaughton did the music, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think Robert McNaughton did the music for Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Yes, Robert McNaughton was one of the composers for Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. As far as other people in the film, it premiered in 2000, officially released in May of 2001. It's a 2000 film. Carrie Snodgrass plays his mother Augusta. Carol Mansell plays Colette Marshall, the film version of Bernice Warden. Sally Champlin as Mary Hogan. And Pat Skipper as Sheriff Jim Stillwell. And yeah, so basically the movie, there are a couple scenes of him going to graveyards, digging up graves, but it really just shows him opening up the casket, then it'll cut to the next scene. It has a real made-for-TV look and feel to it, that low budget. And also a lot of like fade to blacks, which kind of gives it that made-for-TV feel. It does do a good job at just kind of showing this sort of dull, rural feel, boring feel that, you know, a super small town, Plainfield, probably felt like in the 1950s. Plainfield has never really had a population more than 700 to 800 people. So it's a very small town, and the movie does capture that. When characters are talking about other characters, they just address them by first name because everybody knows everybody. And it really just shows Ed how he lives his day-to-day life. It slowly starts to reveal, why he goes to the graveyard, which the opening of the film does show him at the cemetery, than him trying to resurrect his mother. Which, in everything I've read or seen or heard, I never came across anything about him trying to do these rituals to resurrect his mother. Like, he brings a body back, and he does some kind of incantation to bring his mother back. I never came across anything like that. Now, it is believed that the women that he dug up were elderly. He would check the obituaries. If he found an elderly woman that died that week that kind of looked like his mother, he would go and dig her up, which the movie does touch on that. Shows him looking through the obituaries. There's even a scene where he does, and there's no women that have died, so he just kind of looks disappointed, puts the newspaper away. And the idea being, because they look like his mother, he was unable to dig her up because the ground had something to do with either the ground being too frozen or just because of some sort of vault that some caskets are put in. They're kind of impenetrable, at least for a single person and a shovel. He was unable to get to her. And it very lightly touches on why he's making the skin suit. Is because he was confused about his sexuality and his gender. He wondered what it would be like to be a woman. He had come across this sex change operation story, which was huge in the 1950s. The only thing the film touches on is he's at Mary Hogan's bar, and he just asks the guys there, like, anybody ever think about changing your sex like that one fella in whatever country? And they all laugh at him. So it doesn't really delve into the why he does this. The only thing it does say is he was haunted by visions and voices of his mother telling him to do this because the women are sinners. Yes, he was diagnosed with some form of schizophrenia, but I don't think it's ever been said, and I don't think he ever said that his mother was commanding him. So I think that's a fictional liberty that they take, or maybe an expansion of, a mixture of wanting to bring his mother back in lieu of women that he dug up, not necessarily the resurrection stuff like they say, but I say the resurrection stuff and sort of the visual and audible orders of his mother telling them to kill. I think that's fictional stuff for the film, because that stuff I never came across. But I mean, he was schizophrenic. He was said to have suffered from visual and audible hallucinations, so it's not that far off. It's not like they're totally pulling something out of their ass about it. And the characters of his two victims were pretty close to what I've read about. Mary Hogan was this kind of foul-mouthed, dirty-talking, flirtatious woman that worked at the bar. That's how she was portrayed here. Whereas Bernice Ward was this very, very sweet, grandmotherly-like woman, which the Colette Marshall character was portrayed as. So they did that well. However, it's never been said that Mary Hogan, because what he would do was he would go there when they were closed or empty, shoot them, empty, or take, well, with Hogan, he went in as she was closing or after she closed, shot her, emptied the register, dragged her onto his truck, and took her home. In the film, it shows that she survived and was held captive until she died, tied to the bed. So, like, when the cops show up to ask him, she's still alive. That's pretty fictional. I've never came across anything like that. But the thing that's handled probably the most accurate would be the murder of Colette Marshall or Bernice Warden. But before I get to that, the flashbacks, it does feel kind of like the Dahmer film, kind of like a bullet point film by Dahmer. I mean, the one from 2002, the one that I just reviewed, where the flashbacks feel like it's a way to just tell us all these key events that have happened. Like, okay, showing how abusive his father is, the religious fanaticism of his mother, which his mother was said to be this large, heavier set, imposing woman, where here she's portrayed as kind of skinny, sickly looking, and her acting isn't that great. You're just gonna be a sniveling little whatever for the rest of your life. Yeah, I mean, I kind of always thought of her as like Carrie's mom. Whenever I'm reading about Ed Gein, here it doesn't quite full show how domineering she was, and as far as her just being a religious fanatic, she really just kind of talks in Bible verses until she's coercing him to kill through these hallucinations, saying like, oh, she's a harlot because whatever reason. The flashback of his brother's death, supposedly they were fighting a brush fire, and they had just had this falling out because Ed worshipped his mother. Henry kind of wanted to get away. Supposedly met some woman, was gonna run away with her, and saying how you should leave too. You don't have to live here and listen to her crap. And then supposedly, well, so they were fighting the brush fire. They lost sight of each other, and so then Ed went to go get help. Then somehow led them to his body. They called it smoke of inhalation, but they found bruises on him. It was ruled ultimately as an accident, but some people do believe that because of that falling out and the way Henry talked about their mother, Ed might have killed him. Now, it's never been proven. It's pretty much just legend at this point. But the film does depict, it does show Ed, taking the butt of his rifle, killing him. And they make it look like Ed started the fire to cover up the murder, which is just a bunch of CGI fire. That looks terrible. But it's like this ring of fire around him, almost as if to depict what Ed and Augusta would believe, or what Ed would believe, that because of what he said, he's going to go to hell. But so they altered that a little bit. Like, I'm pretty sure they were having the argument, and then sometime they were fighting this brush fire, lost each other. If he did kill him, it was during the brush fire, but in the film they make it look like he started it to cover everything up. There's a flashback of his mother catching him masturbating in a bathtub to this detective magazine, and then beating belting the hell out of him. That was a story that he told. The beginning of the film shows him babysitting these two young brothers, which he was known to be a babysitter. He was known to be good with kids. And it does show how the kids stumbled across some severed heads or shrunken heads in his room, which he was always very upfront. He was like, yeah, someone sent me these. They're authentic shrunken heads from the Philippines or something from World War II. So it shows some kids finding the heads, the kids that he was babysitting, so it shows that. It doesn't really show how much of a handyman he was. Like, people around town would be like, hey, truck's busted, or furnace is broke, or need wood chopped. He was always glad to do that. The film doesn't really delve into that. But it does take a few scenes of him looking at his artifacts. So he has the box of noses where he's looking at himself in the mirror and putting noses up to his face and laughing. There is a scene where he wears the breast vest and a leather mask at night, just kind of prancing around his property, banging a drum, howling at the moon, which he was known to do, or it was something he said he would do. And I have to say, this scene actually is creepy. I always thought this scene was creepy. It's this very deep blue, I think filmmakers call it day for night. Like, it was a daytime shot, but it's just this harsh blue trying to make it look nighttime. And I gotta say, he looks creepier and better than Leatherface in some of the more recent Chainsaw Massacre films. I would have taken that in a Chainsaw Massacre film. And so, like Dahmer, as far as events that happen, it's pretty accurate. Or everything that happens in the film did happen in real life. It's just slightly altered, if so. Now, the murder of Bernice Warden is pretty close to real life. Of course, the name is different, but he went in the day before to say, I gotta come in tomorrow to buy antifreeze, which tomorrow was also, I think, opening day of hunting season, when pretty much the whole town was going to be out hunting. In the film, the guy that's working the store with her is just a younger guy. It's her manager, where in real life it was her son. So he goes in, buys antifreeze, but then says he wants to try out one of the rifles. So she hands it to him when she's not looking. He takes out a a, a bullet. I don't know why I was spacing. I'm probably debating on whether to say bullet or shell, but take out a bullet and then shoots her, drags her to the back, puts her in her truck, and then grabs the whole cash register, trying to make it look like a robbery. And of course, the whole time, Mother is there talking to him, guiding him, which again, I don't think Ed Gein ever said that was the case, but the film that's how the film shows it. Kind of giving it more of a psycho feel, if anything. So then he drives somewhere, parks her truck, walks back to get his truck, goes up, picks up the register and the body, goes out to his house. Now, pretty much the same. What happened in real life, that's what happens in the film. In the film, the managers is getting gas and someone says, "Hey, did she go hunting today?" "No, she's at the store." "Oh, well, because I saw one of her delivery drivers going and it looks like the store's closed." He knows there's no delivery driver. So the manager rushes out there, sees the blood trail going out back. He already thought Gein was weird and possibly harmful. Now, in real life, the son just shows up. The son just showed up, saw the blood, went to the sheriff, saying, "Hey, you got to check this guy out." Even making jokes about Mary Hogan. The situation is exactly the same as Mary Hogan's 3 years ago. Again, the film makes it look like days apart, when in reality it was 3 years. Gein was there that night as well. At least go check him out. So these officers just went to his house. He wasn't home. And they walked around to the cellar area, because I think there was one area of the house where you could walk straight into the cellar. And that's where they found Bernice Warden's body. Hanging by her feet, decapitated, gutted from the groin to the neck like a deer. And they set out to arrest him. Now, in real life, he was at a grocery store when they went to go find him. In the film, he's having dinner at some local friend's house. And then that's where the manager just shows up, holds him at gunpoint, and then the sheriff walks in, stops him, and then said, "Yeah, you're under arrest." So it's really just the aftermath that's kind of altered. The actual murder itself is pretty accurate to what we know to be true to have happened. And so then you do get some real footage, real news footage, both in the opening of the film and at this point, of locals being interviewed about Ed. And at the end, you do get news footage of Ed being led from his property to the police car and him covering up his face. And then there's just shots of law enforcement taking all these artifacts out of his house, and there's just like camera shot, type editing of all these different artifacts. It doesn't show all of them, and most of them are pretty accurate. You know, it showed Mary Hogan's head in a box, Mary Hogan's face in a bag. It showed the skull soup bowls, the a breast vest which was put on a seamstress on a mannequin. The only thing it showed that was slightly different was Bernice Warden's heart was actually in a bag in front of his stove in real life, where in the movie it shows it in a pan on his stove. And then it just shows Ed in the mental hospital some years later, just talking about how nice the hospital is, and how he doesn't remember anything. And the last line, my mother was a saint. And that's the movie. Oh, and there is an end text saying that he was found legally insane, sent to the uh, hospital. Sorry, I was trying to remember the name of it. It I think it's Mendoza. I'm only looking it up now because because I'm Mendota. Okay. Which, in real life, at first, he was just automatically sent there because he was found unfit. Then in 1968, he was retried, or tried, found guilty by insanity, and put back in the same hospital, where he died in 1984 at the age of 77. The movie says 78, but he hadn't had his birthday yet. So, overall, this movie is pretty accurate. I mean, yeah, the CGI fire is kind of really crappy looking, really silly looking. But I think where it's supposed to be a hallucination, it can look kind of artificial. Except for the scene where it shows his brother with the fire. Yeah, that looks really bad. The acting isn't terrible. Obviously, Steve Railsback is the big takeaway. Uh, the woman that played Colette, I thought she did fine. The woman that played Mary Hogan, I thought she did fine. But like the actress that played Augusta was kind of over the top. It, it could have done better showing his childhood and just how he was made this way. Because again, when it comes to nature versus nurture, you're not going to get a better case than this. So, I mean, it did show several key events of his childhood and his life, but I I feel like it could have shown more. Again, this is just one of those bullet point films where it's just kind of out of context, like through flashback, showing us key events everyone should know. Ones that anyone moderately into true crime might already know. But at least the grave robbing, the two murders were handled pretty accurately. The whole thing about Mary Hogan surviving and being held captive is very not true. That's highly fictional for the film. But it does do a good job at just showing how poorly he acts socially with the other locals and the locals' perception of him. There's a number of characters that say, he's odd but he's harmless. He's weird but he's sweet, or he wouldn't hurt a fly. He's quiet. He's a good guy. It does do a good job with that. I would probably call this another sort of basic or kind of true crime serial killer movie for beginners, because it really does just have basic knowledge of Gein. If I could recommend anything, if you really want to delve into the story of Ed Gein, definitely pick up the book Deviant by Harold Schechter. Now, without having seen it, I'm willing to bet this one is way better than the Kane Hodder one. We'll see. I do need to see Deranged, even though that's sort of a fictionalized account, but I heard that's pretty accurate as well. This is a film I've grown to like more and more as I watch it. At first, I didn't like it, and I was thinking, this doesn't feel accurate at all, based on what I've seen and watched, but it's actually not that far off. And ultimately, it also does do a good job at just showing just who he is, who he was in this small town to everyone around him, and kind of why he was able to get away with things, and how and why people just never suspected him of anything, because he was kind of slow, and people just saw him as a weirdo. But yeah, that is 2000's Ed Gein, or In the Light of the Moon. I do have a bunch more serial killer films to get to, a bunch more I will be picking up throughout this month. Again, I've already made a full list of pretty much every film that's been made that's about a real life serial killer. So anything that can be recommended or suggested, it's already on the list. I'm already going to get to it. So, yeah, that's Ed Gein, and stay tuned for more serial killer films, and thank you for watching.